Okay, so back to the last name. So how would you say it?
Your last name.
Yeah,
Well,
give it a shot. Give it a shot.
hang on. I have to pull it up in front of me now. 1 second.
I have faith. I have faith. There's a lottery ticket being won if you say the last name correctly.
All right, hang on. Let me pull it up on my phone. Sorry, I should have been prepared because I minimized everything just to
Nah, it's all right.
be prepared. All right, hang on. Let's see. I would say, and it's going to be bad because I'm notorious for pronouncing people's last names wrong the first time. Okay, I would
Okay.
say Emmanuel Igweh.
See, you did close enough. There you go. Okay, so to be able to say the last name properly, you need a little bit of an accent.
Okay,
So you
right,
need a little bit of like you lived in Italy for a bit, right?
right. I
So
did
you pick up some Italian?
some, but I'm pretty bad.
You're pretty bad. All right, just let's go off the top. Let's see. Can you how do you say how are you basically?
I mean, ciao, ciao, buonasera. I mean, it's not a
See?
good Italian accent. It's bad.
Okay.
It's bad. I mean, we can get into like why I lived in Italy and can't really speak Italian.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. But guys, if you're just joining us, as you know, we're just basically starting off the conversation. We're doing something a little bit out of the ordinary. Joining me to my left, to my right, depends on how you're viewing the screen right now. I have today's special guest joining me. We're going to be discussing everything from radio host. She's going to tell us her story, and she's got some investigative FBI questions she's going to be asking me as well as we go ahead and dive into this podcast. But Katie, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, I am Katy Sewal. I am, let's see, how do you introduce yourself? I am the co-host and creator of a podcast called The Bittersweet Life. It's been on the air for the last 10 years. Prior to that, I have been working with NPR, National Public Radio, for almost 20 years. For a lot of that time, I was the senior producer of a morning show that was on every single day of the week for 2 hours a day. And I still fill in host at that station. And I would also say I'm a writer. So
Okay, so
I'm a
let's
radio writing.
let's break it down. So why is the podcast? For those that are not familiar with the podcast, why is it called the Bittersweet Life?
The Bittersweet Life. Okay. It originated 10 years ago when I moved to Rome, and it's co-hosted with another woman who is a childhood friend of mine who also happens to live in Rome. So when it began in its infancy, it was basically a look at the expat experience from the short-term perspective and from the long-term experienced perspective. So my co-host had lived there now she's almost been there 20 years now, but she was almost 10
Are you
years.
still in Rome right now?
I'm not in Rome. She is. She is.
Okay.
I'm in Seattle, Washington. Yeah.
Huge
But
contrast from Rome, but yeah.
huge contrast, and also a real challenge when you're podcasting with someone who's 9 hours ahead of you all the time.
Huh?
But it's called The Bittersweet Life because, I mean, people tend to romanticize moving abroad. They tend to romanticize living in Italy, especially moving to Italy is, especially if you're an American, people tend to think that's the gold standard, the dream. But the reality of moving to another country is that it is both uh, exciting, but also extremely unsettling. And, it is not just sweet and it's not just bad. It's bittersweet. It's both things. And then as the show has expanded, like into 10 years, where it's now much more an exploration of life and what you want to be doing with yours, it follows that range of like life and death and everything in between. Like life is not simple, it's bittersweet, it's all the things. So
Interesting. So there's the good and there's the bad, right? So but you take it as it is. So why Rome of all, you could have moved you know, to Mykonos, to Greece. You could have moved to, France. You could have moved, but why Rome?
if only it was so interesting. It honestly was not my decision. It was that my husband got a fellowship to study there for 1 year. He basically threw a Hail Mary and like entered his name to try to win this scholarship, not thinking he would ever get it. And then was one of 7 people chosen to go. And it just happened to be based in Italy. I was lucky because I did happen to have this childhood friend who lived in Italy. So for me, having no reason and no tie to go there, uh,
Okay.
and because it was going to require me to give up my career at NPR to do this experience, it was definitely helpful to know that at least I had one friend on the ground when I got there.
And
Uh,
I'm assuming that helped because obviously moving to, I mean, I kind of have a similar story, not necessarily to the part as to, I was not a radio show host or, any of that fancy gig that, you were a fancy celebrity there. But I moved from a third world country and I immigrated to the States, but I didn't know anybody. So kind of, I have a little bit of that bittersweet. That's why I was kind of intrigued by this podcast is I'm going to have a little bit of a bittersweet, but I'm curious your experience on what's the bitter part about the expert life, as you would call it.
the bitter part of the expat life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to have you on my show talking about why you came to the United States, right? uh,
Interesting. I mean,
uh,
there's a lot. There's ways in which we could go in that conversation, but yeah.
um, what is the bitter part of it? I think people underestimate that when you displace yourself, not that you're not like going to find something new, you know, but you are displacing yourself from the person that you were before. I think that people underestimate how lonely that can be.
Mm.
I think they underestimate how long you can sort of cast about trying to figure out like how you actually belong within this new society or if you even belong in this new society. Um, and that it can take so much longer to find your footing than you ever suspect. Like sometimes you feel like, well, I'll give it a hard year and then I'll really know what's going on. And I mean, I was only in Rome for a year, so I had no time. Like I had to figure it out. But it really actually does take like longer than a year to figure out like, to get your land legs, so to speak, and even begin to understand what's happening.
So what was the one big thing you would say you struggled with in the 1 year that you were there?
Um, I think it was 2 things, especially in the beginning. One was loneliness. I mean, I told you that I moved to Rome kinda unexpectedly, so I couldn't speak Italian. I was trying to learn it, but it was sorta like, out of the blue, you're moving to a foreign speaking country. So it was loneliness, like kind of feeling like the world was operating around you and you were like this island of human moving through it that people just couldn't really interact with and didn't really care to, honestly. And then I think it was also just not knowing what my purpose was. Like
Mm.
I never thought that I was like a purpose-driven person, but I had spent like 10 years as like the very important person running this very important radio show. And then all of a sudden, nobody needed me. Nobody was wondering where I was. I had to like decide like who am I in this new circumstance? What am I going to
Interesting.
do with my time? And I think that that was untethering in a way that I wasn't expecting. It took me a while to figure out like what do I do now?
Interesting. There's a follow-up question I want to ask to that. So recently I have a few friends who, are in the entrepreneurship world in the sense as to, they started a business or, they have something going on for them, a venture. And one of them happened to be a lawyer, and we were talking about a situation of he was talking to me about this relationship he got into. He's in his mid-30s, and his girlfriend at the time was in her late 20s. I think she was 26. So based on this is his story. And he told her, he goes, so they were in love, the whole, can tie the knot, the whole 9 yards. But he said, we have to hold off on kids because right now, my schedule is all, taken care of. But I have a hot cutoff at 35. Once I hit 35, I'll, slow down on everything, drop everything, and we can go ahead
Mm,
and, start having a family. And I said, and then what happened was she was like, no, we're not going to do this because I don't have the same time as you as to wait. Time is ticking, time at the clock is ticking right now. So the relationship ended up not working out. But
mhm,
me and him then had a follow-up question. And I said, do you really think you would have been able to stop at 35? Right.
mhm,
And he goes, yeah, I think I would have. I'm like, honestly, let's think about it right now. Your personality, your work hours. Explain to me how many hours you work at each. He's like, I put in 70 to 80 hour week. I was like, are you complaining or do you enjoy it? He goes, I enjoy it.
mhm,
I was like, okay, so now imagine you have your 80-hour weeks and then now you drop it down to 35, 40 hours to be a dad and stay at home and do the whole 9 yards, be home more. I'm like, how would you feel? He goes, honestly, I don't think I'd be happy. And I say,
mhm,
okay, so let's unpack that. And then it kind of went into the fact as to his purpose, because he started going off to, he's like, yeah, I kind of enjoy it. He's like, it's almost like an addiction, like, you know, it's almost like an addiction to work schedule. It's not really the same segue. But the reason why I bring it up is I
Mhm.
think a lot of people struggle, not even just moving, in a sense, as to, you go from a high, let's say you go from a C-suite executive. You know, we have a lot of people that are in the business world that watches. You go from being a C-suite executive to now you are basically like having to stay at home and work a 15, 20-hour week. And then you feel
Mhm.
you have this midlife crisis that kind of set in, and you go and buy a Porsche. You know, the you know, you go so
Yeah, yeah, for
which
sure.
brings me to a question about purpose, right? So because I want to kind of stay on the topic. So what did you end up realizing or taking on as your purpose while you were in Rome?
It's funny because the bittersweet life. One of the things we explore a lot is exactly that thing that you kind of feel like life has a script. Like when you're talking about that friend, and he says, by 35 I'll be able to do this. I don't know why 35 is this arbitrary date where we're like, okay, well I have to be married by 35, or I have to be serious by 35, or I have to quit everything I love by the time I'm 35. And a lot of what we are exploring in the show is the fact that like life actually doesn't have a script, and that's what can be so startling when you get to like older ages, where you realize like maybe I've been following somebody else's plan, like somebody else's idea of what I was supposed to be doing with my life. So I don't know. I think part of what gave me purpose in Rome, I think part of it was I realized like do I need to have a purpose while I'm in Rome? Or can this can this be a time where I explore, try to figure out new passions, try to recover a little bit like the artist that I was before being an artist like became a part of my actual job. Because it is something, there's a different thing about creating for art's sake, and also and then creating because you must continue creating every single day. Like I had a 2-hour daily show, which means like whether or not you're feeling brilliant, the show must go on. Um, and so I think part of it I was trying to recover like, well, what did I want to be doing before the momentum of having a job carried me forward? And then I think in creating the bittersweet life was one thing that I wanted to do when I was there. I didn't know it was going to be called the bittersweet life. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I did know that I wanted to take all of my NPR training and create something new with it, something that would be intelligent enough to an NPR audience, but would be more personable and more personal, I suppose, but more kind of a conversation. There was a formality to NPR that I wanted to experiment breaking down a little bit. And I asked this friend of mine, Tiffany Parks, my co-host. We were just out to tea one afternoon, and I said, "Hey, I really want to experiment with trying a podcast. That's what I just told you." And I said, "Do you want to be? You don't want to be my co-host? You want to give it a try?" And she said, "Sure." Very casually, never expecting that this would be the next 10 years of her life. I don't think either one of us expected that this was going to be an ongoing thing. I think we thought it was going to be we do it while I'm there as an experiment, and then when I move home, we'll just tie the show shut with a little bow and put it in a drawer, and here it is 10 years later, and she's still working on it all the time. So
Do you regret starting the show?
no, I don't. No, I mean, there are times when you're because it is weekly. It used to be twice a week, and we've put that on pause just for now. It will probably come back at some point, but there are certain weeks when you think, "Geez, like why did I ever commit to something like this?" But
I
then
mean,
there are other weeks, like during the pandemic, for instance, where all of a sudden you're stuck in your home and you have this whole community of people all around the world that are going through the same thing,
mm,
and in that period, we were so grateful that we'd started it because it made us feel like we were actually still doing something while the whole world was shut down, and
and what
doing it with a lot of other people. And that felt great. So it's really a roller coaster podcasting. I'm sure like
there's two parts, but it is a roller coaster. But you know what's interesting is there's a lot of people that want to start a podcast, and there's this
mhm,
young lady. She's absolutely phenomenal, and she starts asking me for advice on um starting a podcast. So I was like, okay. So she's like, what do you use to record? Like, how do you do yours? I'm like, we have a studio downstairs. I'm on the third floor. We have a studio downstairs, but we only go there when we have an in-person guest. But whenever I'm in my home office and I just do everything here versus having a
mhm.
producer come in, the whole 9 yards. And I asked her, I said, why do you want to start a podcast? I mean, there's thousands of podcasts out there. And she goes, yeah, the message, I really want, people to get the message. And the reality is a lot of people don't know that it is very, very hard to
Hmm.
start. I think actually it's, the lifespan of a podcast. Most people quit a podcast within the first 10 episodes.
Yep, for sure.
Which,
Yeah, and
which
don't you hate it when they have such a great name and it's just frozen there?
yeah, the name is just like it's just like yeah, I could have no, no, but it's also
Yeah.
and also why do you think that is? Why do you think most podcasts, most people, stop within the first 10 episodes? Most people quit within the first 6 months. Most people why do you think that is?
I mean, I think it takes a much more dedication than you suspect. That
In
you
what
it
sense?
requ I mean, it requires you to show up and show up and show up and show up and show up over and over and over again, and for some people, that's just really hard, or something shakes their confidence in it, like,
Hmm.
early on, and so then showing up the next week feels hard, and then they don't really wanna do it, and
Yeah.
so they put it off and be like, "Well, maybe I need to make a better plan," and then you know, I mean, I think people think it's gonna be not everyone. I think some people know what they're getting into, but I think some people think it's gonna be as easy as I get a best friend of mine, we turn on a microphone, we sit in the room, we pour a bunch of glasses of wine, and we talk, and that's gonna be somehow enough to, like, make a successful podcast, and it's just not true. I mean, it takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of, like, sitting in your house editing stuff.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of making sure things sound right. It takes a lot of self-marketing, particularly if you don't have any money to put into it. I mean, because they say podcasting is free, and it is essentially free. I mean, there's a lot of bills that are associated with it too that I don't think
Hmm.
people realize when they're getting into it. Like, there are monthly payments every single month. So if you're not getting any traction, it does sometimes feel like, "Wow, I'm just throwing money away."
So how long
But,
did it take you? Did it take you to get any traction? How long did it take you?
oh my god, I mean, we started with a list of like 100 people who had when I was leaving NPR, they let me say on the air that I was moving to Rome, and anybody who wanted to, like, keep track of what I was doing could send me their email address. And it was, like, maybe 100, 150 people, you know? And which was not a bad start, but, so I just sent out an email to those 150 people, and some of those people adopted it right away, and some of them didn't know how to find a podcast. I mean, it was 10 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
some people were just confused by the mere mention of the word and never, came on board, and then, I mean, even still, it's, like, always a slow incremental
Hmm.
uh, growth, and so, like, how do you judge success? Because
True.
most podcasts don't go from here to here, they go, like, in a very slow ramp, you know? And then you do like, you have more listeners over here, where's my hand? Here years later, and a lot of those people will go back and listen from the beginning, you know, but it is still like a slow incline. I'm not a celebrity that, everyone already knows, and I just turn on the mic and everyone's like, "Hey, I'm sitting in my basement. Let's hang out with Jon Stewart or something." Like, I he might be able to turn on a mic and have a million people show up.
So
I
what's keeping you going? I mean, obviously, 10 years in, 10 years is not. I always like to say, if you stuck with something for 10 years, that's already you. That's part of you. There's no walking back. There's no, hey, I'm gonna go in the corner and start a new side gig or start a new show and call it side gig. What's keeping you going?
I think it's gotta be a lot of things. One, I think for me, I mean, I come from a radio producer background, so, like, I mean, in years when the show was still coming along, um, the artist in me, the producer in me was like, "I'm doing this as much for me as I am for the listener,"
Mm.
like, to create something, to make something, and, especially in the displacement we were talking about being an expat, there's a displacement when you move abroad, there's a big displacement that happens when you move back, like, you haven't moved back, but I moved back, and then you're like, "What am I doing? I'm back, now what?" So I think it gave me a purpose, um, and then I think it's also about the relationship I have with my co-host, but then it becomes about the people too, and so now there's people showing up, right?
Okay.
Every week they're showing up, and there's a part of me that's like, if they're showing up, then I'm showing up. you
Mm.
know? And I think that it also is like a matter of point of view, like whether or not your show is successful or not. Sometimes I say, like, okay, maybe NPR wouldn't look at my show and think, wow, that one's a huge success, because by their metrics, they're like way up here, right? They're like a national foundation. Uh, but I say to myself, to encourage myself, if this many people were showing up in a room, like I rented like a theater, and this many people were showing up every single week to hang out with me and hear what I had to say. I mean, that would feel really impressive if they were all sitting in front of me, you know?
That's true. That's
And
true.
so by that metric, it's like, how do you gauge success? Like, I don't need 1,000,000 people to show up to feel like the show is worth showing up for, I wouldn't mind if 1,000,000 people showed up, but it's not, the reason that I'm doing it. Like, the individuals are as important as, like, the masses to me,
Interesting.
So
Someone said something because I think I had the same conversation on the podcast that just aired. I think so. And when you first start, and let's say you're on YouTube or one of the social media platforms, right? And you get 50 views. And you're like,
Mhm.
oh my God, no one's watching this. There's this person out there that's doing 50,000 or getting 50 views. And we're like, all right, let's pull it back. Let's imagine that you're in a room and now you're surrounded by those same 50 people. Now that
Mhm.
same 50 on a screen looks like it's not that much, but 50 in person, and then it's almost interesting. I was thinking like, because you said a lot as far as, you know, there's a lot of self marketing. There's a lot of promotion that goes into play. A lot of people think I'm going to start a podcast and then I'm going to have a hit. You have to create relevant content. You have to be entertaining and exciting. You can't be boring. You can't be in a position where we have a podcast right now. We're like, and guys, no one's going to tune in. People are going to tune off, right? And
Mhm.
so I think there's a lot of people that don't take into that. But that kind of leads me back to the question, because I really wanted to touch on this. Is I'm gonna play a scenario, and I want you to think about this. So imagine we have somebody who's early 30s. They've been stuck in a career, right? They're like, because you had a position in which you went from being you know a host on a radio show that people knew about, to all of a sudden I'm gonna go to Italy, not speak the language, and then try to start this thing out with a friend of mine. So let's think about it from a perspective. There's somebody who's watching this right now, and that person's in a position of like they're in the early 30s, or probably in late 30s or in the early 40s, and they feel like the boat has sailed and they
Mhm.
want to do something. They feel like they're not living their purpose. You
Yeah.
understand what I mean? What would you say to that individual? Because I'm watching this right now. I'm like, yeah, I have all this, I have all that, but then again, it's like there's something missing. I feel like I'm not accomplishing what I was brought into this planet to accomplish.
Mhm. Yeah, we hear that a lot from people on the show. One of the main questions is like, is it too late? Like, did the ship sail? Like let's say my dream is to move to Italy, but oh gosh, now I'm in my 40s and I have a kid, like, or something like that. Like, is it too late? Did I miss the boat? And I mean, our general view is it gets harder to do stuff sometimes, if you now have 3 children that you're also having to plan around or
That's
something like
true.
that. Things can get harder, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be done. I mean, it's not too late until you're not with us anymore, like until you die, it's not too late to say, this is not the way things are going is not the right way for me. I don't know how I ended up here. I don't want to do this. I think another thing to consider is like something I learned by, I was definitely a person who probably would have stayed in a career path for the majority of my life, and I disrupted that, and so now I've had to kind of make my own way, and that makes every year a little bit different. But I think that you forget that if you have a job, and a job that you maybe like or one that you're really sick of, that within that job you have a lot of different skills. And sometimes it's hard to see that those skills can apply in other places in different ways. Like, so I could say, well, my only qualification is that I can work in radio, that I'm a radio producer, that I work for public radio. But the truth of the matter is, like, I can be a journalist. I know how to write. I know how to talk to people. I've learned how to interview people. I can keep learning how to interview people. I can take classes. be hired to teach other people how to interview people. I mean, all of this is to say that it's hard sometimes to think that your skills apply in other places, but they do. And so sometimes it's a matter of like starting to look at things that feel more right, uh, and seeing if, and just like kind of going for it. I think the other thing that's worth thinking about is, you were saying that you have people come to you that are like, I feel like I should have a podcast. And I have people come to me all the time that said, I feel like I should write a book. Like, do you think I should write a book? And what I always say is, I mean, do you want to spend your life writing a book? Because you can feel like you want to write a book, but if you don't actually want to spend your actual time, your actual life sitting writing a book, then no, you don't need to have a book. You know, I mean, that's the thing. We sometimes think like, oh, I need to do these things, but you have to remember that this is like what you're spending your life doing. So if the idea of writing a book or showing up and hosting a podcast every week and doing all the editing and everything that's required of you, it's not something that you have to do, you know. It should be something that you choose to do.
You know what's also interesting to that, and you said that, is a few things I'm starting to realize with a lot of people, but a lot of the questions is to, how do I find my purpose? And I think there's two parts to it, right? And there's a two parts. You've been married for how long?
I've been married for what? I don't know, 11 years?
11 years. Okay.
Something
Marriage is
like
not
that,
easy.
12?
Marriage is not easy,
Mhm.
right? So the reason why I'm bringing that is this: is you've had people who've been married for 5 years and didn't make it past 5 years, 6 years. But there's always that thought in your head as to, I don't know if it's you, but some people get the thought, a lot of people, guys talk. And they're like, yeah, I remember I was talking to a guy and he was like, yeah, man, I probably would have stayed single if I could think about it now, because it's like all these options, all that stuff. But the reason why I'm bringing that point is, there was a part of the brain where once you used to the same thing over, or same person over and over again, you get into that position where you're like, oh man, the new and shiny object.
Mhm.
It's like the new and shiny. It's like same thing with people who are in a relationship or long-term, relationship or marriage. And then they're like, oh, well, if I was out there single right now, geez, God, you have no idea. And then they get single and they're like, wait, I didn't know it was this bad.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the reason why I bring that is, I think as human beings, we get to a position where we actually we get bored, and then we say we look at our boredom and say that we're not doing our purpose. So I'll give you an example. If somebody's in a
Mhm.
job and they're doing $500,000 a year, and they're like, oh my God, I'm not living my purpose. Honestly, yeah, I think you are. You're pretty much living your purpose. But then they go into a self-sabotage mode. I personally think the word purpose is a double-edged sword. In the sense as
Mhm.
to, m- maybe your purpose is something that, just like you said, podcasts. I think most people shouldn't start a podcast unless they can self-fund it, you
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
not the odds of you getting a sponsor as a brand new podcast, unless your dad is Jeff Bezos, I mean, you're probably not going to get a sponsor, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
which means you have to self-fund it, or have family members willing to chip in and tell them, hey guys, it's going to take maybe about 2-3 years before you get you get your money back, maybe like 20% or 30% of it, based off how this podcast does. But the thing about purpose, to the point of it, because I had a guest on, and he was a pitch, I think it was a pitch coach, and he would help prepare people to pitch to venture capitals, VCs. And he
Mhm.
basically was in a position where he was like, what is our purpose, right? He was kind of like in that position. That's the reason I was asking that question, because there's a lot of people that struggle with defining with self-identifying with, like, what am I accomplishing in this world? Like, you
Mhm.
could have said, hey, you know what? Maybe my purpose is not being in the radio. Maybe my purpose is, going to be in the ISS, in the space station.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could have been an astronaut, right? And so, so,
Yeah.
but it's just I don't know. I think personally, I think there's a lot of misleading information. I think a lot of people let social media, personally, if you
Mhm.
ask me, get in their head with what their purpose should be, right?
Oh, for
Or,
sure.
or, or make them feel like whatever they're doing right now is not happy, or is not, like, I know I'm kind of on a roll. I'm rambling right now, but you know how people go about the 9 to 5. Are you on you on social media, right?
Yeah.
You know how people go about the 9 to 5, right? I'm pretty sure you've gotten it. And they're like, oh, you are working this and you're 95, but your boss is making this much money, and and then you're like, you should be your own boss, and then someone's like, yeah, you know what, yeah, I should be my own boss. I'm gonna quit my job and go be my own boss. And then they're like, and then they do, and then they're like, wait, hold on, you guys hiring again? I want to come back again for that position because I see how difficult it is. And
Yeah,
and
for
it's so
sure.
funny because people let themselves get, I guess, misled in the whole. I think just your purpose is just do what you enjoy, but still be making money for the most part.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard too because 'cause we're so distractible that you don't really
Mm-hmm.
sit down and, like, make lists of, like, I mean, you could sit down and make a list today about the things that you really like. Like, if you had to sit down and be like, "What do I really like?" Like, when I'm doing this thing or maybe it's just like, I like seeing a bird land on my windowsill, it could be that simple. But, I mean, and then, like, look and see if there's any common themes. But we don't ever take any time to, like, sit down and do something like that. We kind of expect it to just hit us over the head, and occasionally it does hit us over the head. Like, I think when I first got to radio, I was an intern for years. I mean, it was not the easiest field to get into. But the first day I walked in as an intern and I was sitting in one of the editing booths, with the microphones around and the phones connected to the sliders on the board and stuff. I immediately thought, like, "Oh yeah, I am not leaving this place until they give me a job." Because I was just like, "This is so cool." Like, this is exactly what I wanna be doing. Now, was it like, I walked in and they're like, "Yeah, you know what? You should be a host. I'm gonna give you a senior producer position," which, producers in radio basically are the people that do everything behind the host to make them sound really good. But, instead it's like you still, even if you get in the door, then you have to, like, slowly work your way toward whatever. So, I mean, it's hard when it's like discovering a passion. You still have to, like, work toward it, and I think that's where people get to, like, thinking that they're running out of time, Like, if you're in your 50s and you realize, like, "I'm really sick of this job, like, but I don't know that I have time to do anything else because the script tells me I've gotta retire by 65," So I've got
That's
no
what's,
time.
yeah.
I
And,
mean,
and
I don't know. It's not like I have an answer. It just is sort of I think about this all the time, just like you. I mean, that's part of the reason why the show still exists is like me thinking about it. You know,
it's still top of mind, but no, it's, I mean,
yeah.
it's a question. It's definitely because, when you get in a podcast, you obviously you interact with a lot of people. You have people come on, and you get to see different personalities, and you have people who can pitch you. We have people who pitch us. We had people who
Mm.
try to offer us deals, and I'm like, honestly, I don't think this is on brand with what we promote. But I think honestly, it's just you know. So today, I didn't know you. Are you a Christian religion, non-denominational?
I was raised by a Presbyterian minister who's now retired, but
Okay, so you okay? All right, there you go. That answers the question.
I mean, it
Um,
sort of answers the question.
oh,
Not
what's the full answer to the
No, I
question?
know. I mean, I would say yes, I was definitely raised religious. I think when you're raised in the church though, at least for me, and I think for I could say the same for my father, because he was also spent his whole life in the church, is that you do get to a point where, the church as its institution can get tiresome.
Hmm.
It's not like that you don't want to keep considering the ideas and consider yourself like a religious or spiritual person, but I think it's sometimes, in my head anyway, gets separated out from the actual building and itself. Spent so much time at church that I tend to only go sporadically now. you know
Okay, okay, fair.
mean,
That's
for
fine.
me, it's
You
more about the community, and I can like to engage with the ideas, as much on my own as with a group of people. So,
okay? I mean, that's fair. I mean, it's either one's fine. Because you could be like, yeah, I go to church every Sunday. You could be. It all depends on that's however you choose to. But the reason why I bring that up is so the church I go to, the pastor made a so for the end of the year 2020 2023, right, we're in 2024 now. He goes, you're going to be given a card, right? And in this card, you need to write what your word of the year is going to be for 2024. And
mm,
everyone's writing a card, people write money, people writing, all sorts of stuff, blah, 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 right? So my girlfriend, she writes hers, right? Boom, I write mine. And things start to happen, right? But what happens is,
mhm.
in a sense, as to what's happening is the opposite of what we wrote down,
Yeah. Okay.
right? It's the opposite of what we wrote down. And then we start, and then I remember, and then I remember if it was a podcast or if it was something I saw on TV. And this man, I can't remember who said it. He said, um, whatever you ask God for, or whatever you set as a goal, whatever you want, you will be tested with the opposite of it.
Hmm.
Right? It's like if you
Mhm.
say, I want patience, you will be tested with everything that will make you impatient. Everything that will make you impatient. Because the for you to get what you want, you have to become somebody that is patient, which means you have to be tested with the opposite of patience to be patient. Or like wisdom. You'll be tested with scenarios where you make stupid decisions, but then you from there you kind of pick it up. But the reason why I bring it up is, with the word purpose, when we say, oh, we're looking for a purpose. What's our purpose? I want to know what's my purpose. You will get tested with the opposite of purpose, which is what?
Mm.
Confusion.
Yeah, wasting your
Right?
time. Yeah.
Wasting your time, confusion. You'll be tested with confusion. We're wasting the time and things that don't add up. So you might say, you know what, I'm looking for my purpose. What's my purpose? And then all of a sudden, somebody comes at you with an opportunity, you jump for it. And then somebody else comes at you with another opportunity, you jump. And then next, you're jumping at it, but then it's like running on a treadmill. You're running. I mean, it's
Mhm.
showing you're running 5 miles. You're showing you your pace, but you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
What
So it's uh,
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what did you actually write down? Or maybe you don't wanna share.
no. I mean, I'm comfortable sharing it, but the word I wrote down was patience. That's the reason why I brought up patience,
Mhm.
and I wrote down patience. And honest to God is my witness. I have been tested with the one the when I say the moment I wrote down the word, it was like the next week everything was making, like it was to the position where, like it was like I was in a position of like impatience, like very much impatient. And then this morning, and I didn't even, the word never even, it never came back to me. But my girlfriend too was also tested. I can't bring her because, for her privacy. She also had hers, like, and it was, and we were, we had a conversation about it. And I said, and then I repeated what he said because I was trying to be smart. I was like, yeah, when you wrote down your word, so God's gonna test you the opposite. She goes, yeah, you're right. And then I didn't even know that in my situation I was also in the same scenario, but I was just in a position of like, like, all right, let's make a decision. Let's make a decision now. And then what I realized was, every time I make a hasty decision, it always comes back and bites me in the butt. So
Mhm.
then I was like, okay, so patience. So then I said, so I did I adapted the rule of three. Okay, this is something I just made up. If you guys want to try it, there's no tested back study to this. No genius to this. No, like, oh my God, all this stuff. Someone's gonna be like, oh man, that's so genius. Like, listen, it's called the rule of three. So the reason why I call the rule of three is, one. So so whatever you want to do, just break it into threes. So
'Kay.
the first three is a little three, is a small three. So you give it, you wait 3 seconds before you respond. Simple conversation. Like, I'm talking to you, wait 3 seconds.
Mhm.
I've been practicing as a podcast host. Waiting 3 seconds. 3 seconds is like 3 minutes. Um,
Yeah, that rule might be different on the radio. We're
that
like
that rule does is different, but in a regular conversation, in a regular conversation, that the rule of three does, I would say, really does. Because have you noticed when you're having a conversation with someone and you're like, oh, this happened, and then the person, rather than responding to what you say, gives the own statement of something else happened, and then what ends up
Mhm.
happening, if you listen, it's like you're just basically throwing words at each other.
Right, right. Not
Right?
listening.
Not
Mhm.
listening, right? So one is just teaching me listening, being patient, is the 3 seconds. The second one is the 3 hours rule. So 3 hours is before I make a major purchase. I just basically, like a medium size, I wait 3 hours. And
Mhm.
then if I'm ever stressed, which means something like really stressful, like really like I'm stressed about, I take 3 days before I respond.
Okay.
Right? Because
Uh-huh.
if you notice, you might be pissed off at someone, like, oh my God, you're like, ah. And then you sleep it off
Mhm.
day one. You might be, you still be pissed off, like, hey, no, you'll sleep it on the couch. And then, but then 2 days later, 3 days later, you're like, hey, you want some coffee?
Yeah, you're like, what were we arguing about?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
what were we arguing about,
Mhm.
right? So it's a weird thing. It's like when you're really stressed out, it's like, because the thing is, if it doesn't hurt you in 3 days and it can wait 3 days, then it's not as urgent as you thought it was.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, I
Right?
like it. It's a good strategy.
It's a good strategy, and I have implemented it. So we were gonna make it. I just had a big team meeting because we have a business side, and we're gonna make a huge decision. And I was like, all right, let's wait 3 days on this.
Mhm.
let's wait a little bit. And then deep down, it's killing me because I'm like, oh my god, if we wait 3 days, like it's just like but it's like all right. So now I'm learning to be a patient person because someone who's patient, a patient person. That's kind of my scenario with it. And for the
Mhm.
viewers, you guys listen to this, do with that as you please. That's not an advice or anything significant per se.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I would also say that by writing patients down, you started to become more aware of, like, where it was happening in your life, and that's why, sometimes, like, writing out a list of what you like and don't like, can make you more aware of, like, how much of those likes and don't likes are actually in your life.
mm,
It's like you're sort of aware, like, but we're also distractible, that sometimes it's as much about you saying, like, "How is my patience doing?" And then all of a sudden you notice, like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so impatient in all these situations," you know? Uh,
no, you that is true. Yeah, no, you're right. But writing it down. Actually, I think writing it down. Are you familiar with the reticular activating system of the brain?
mm-mm.
No. So, let's say I'll give you a scenario, right? The car you drive.
'Kay.
Have you noticed that you see that car everywhere?
Yeah, well, my car is very old, so when I do see it, I feel like me and that person must have something in common. I'm always like, "Yeah, one of the tribe," "We're still driving this old car."
That's fine. But I want you, if you have the time to, I would recommend just do this experiment. You don't have to go through with it,
Okay,
but go like looking around, shopping around for a car that you really like. Like you really like. Let's say it's a newer model, something like that. Don't actually go through with it. Obviously, if you want to, it's up to you. But I
mhm,
wouldn't just say, hey, because I made the mistake of like calling a dealership. I was like, just say, I was like, yeah. And the next thing you know, they've been calling for the past few months. So
right, yeah,
um
watch
I
out.
would I would say just basically just look at it. But what the reticular activating system is basically the filter part of the brain. What it does is basically it's responsible for showing you more of what you think about
Okay,
and focus. So let's say some people call it, some people reference it to the red car syndrome or red car stuff. If you think about a red car, you think about a red Honda Civic, right? You look at a red Honda Civic, you look at the pictures of red Honda Civic. Within a few hours, when you drive out there, all you're going to see is basically a red Honda Civic, and you're going to be like,
mhm,
wait, where did all the red Honda Civics come from? The reality was they were always there. You just never were focused on it, so your brain never showed you more of it. So it's kind of like
mhm,
with writing it down because what's also interesting was my there's a lot of things personally that happened, and everything that happened I was like, I think I could see the future because I wrote this down. I was actually convinced. I was like, I actually wrote this down. But no, that's just basically me. I was gonna go into it, but it's gonna dive into like a huge personal web, and the next it might be an article on this. But
I mean, I think a lot of people think about that as, like, manifesting. I'm not a big manifesting, thinker, I think, in that way. I don't think, like, if I think of something, it will come to me, like, that I will find my
but don't you think it?
spouse. But
Don't
I
you think
I
it?
think it is going into what you're saying, though. It's like if you kind of my sister made a list, like, when she was single and she finally just sat down and made a list of, like, "Well, what would I want somebody I'm dating to actually be like?" And then all of a sudden, like, she started noticing people who had those characteristics, whether
Mhm.
they were available or not. She was like, "Now I know I'm interested in a person who likes XYZ." And so all of a sudden she notices people when they mention it more.
Did she end up dating somebody and getting in a happy relationship?
Yeah, she's got married.
See, so it
Mhm.
does work in a way. You see, the
I mean,
manifestation does
but
manifest.
it does, yeah. I mean, but I just don't think of it in the manifesting. I think of it like you took the time to, like, sort out what it was you were kinda wanting,
Mm.
instead of having it be like a loose, airy idea in your head. You took the time to actually, like, think about it for a while, and then, yeah. I mean, it's probably the same thing. We're basically splitting hairs, but, it's just about knowing, I guess, what you like and what you're looking for.
Interesting. And what you said is that is I think a lot of people just with I think manifesting in a way, it's good to use the word, but I think most people forget the part about you actually having to work. There's actual work that has to be invested in it. And
Yes.
someone said, he goes, if you are unhappy or you struggle with depression, whatever it is, obviously it's a bad thing. He goes, when was the last time you said what you were grateful for?
Mhm.
Like, hey, you're alive.
Mhm.
Most people,
Mhm.
you're alive, and if you have a good job and you're not struggling for money, you have money, right?
Mhm.
And then he said if you would every day in the morning and at night write down 10 things you're grateful for.
Mhm.
That's it, because it forces you to think about the positive.
Yeah, I can my sister, same sister actually, does that kind of as a practice, but I think she only does 3, and she has a friend that she's required to send them to, and that friend is
Oh,
required to text theirs back, and it was just sort of a way to make like, enforce the habit, like that every day I need to send my 3 gratitudes. So sometimes it will be, like, late at night, I'll be visiting, she's just been chatting with me, it's, like, the last thing on her mind, and then she'll like, "Oh, no, hang on, it's getting late, I need to send my 3 gratitudes to my friend before she goes to bed," So
I'm curious what that would look like. You just look at the thread and it's like, I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for, and you get a response, I'm grateful for, I'm grateful, and you're like, wait, for the past 2 years, you guys have just been saying grateful, no good mornings, nothing, just I'm grateful.
I don't know if they actually talk or not otherwise. I'm sure they do, they must because 'cause they're
I,
friends also, but
they have to,
yeah.
but in a way, I personally think, even with me coming to this country, it happened very sporadically. Like it happened one moment, and I came to America for the goal of being a pilot, right? Initially,
Mm.
that was the goal, and that's still something I enjoy doing. It's a phenomenal job. I mean, it's a fancy gig. I mean, I stare out of a window, yeah, and just sound cool. Just
Uh-huh.
kidding. But yeah,
You
no.
walk through slow-mo through airports.
Oh yeah, you got to see the walkthrough. It's like one step. No, no, they don't see me. Hold on. I was like two, and then three, and then yeah, no. It's a very. It's. I
Yeah.
actually thought about once. I actually thought about having someone record the walk, because apparently I was told I have a very noticeable walk.
Oh.
Yeah, I was told I have a very noticeable walk, but then it also gets into like a. I had ones where people would say, "Oh, are you a steward?" One thought I was a stripper. I was like, yeah,
That's a very, multidimensional walk you have there.
I was like, well, I could. It is a very well. It is a very, but it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's an entertaining gig. But my life on its own is, if you told me, and I said this earlier, and I said, if you told me this 14 years ago that I would be living the life that I'm living right now, I would have called you the biggest liar on the planet.
Mhm.
Hands down, 100%. I would have said that you are lying to me right now, and stop lying to me, because all lies go to hell. I would have said that.
Uh-huh.
And but now I'm just looking, and it's like, what? It's interesting, because it's like there's human. I don't know how to explain it, but I think we set ourselves short for what we can achieve personally, because we limit ourselves to what we can physically. Because think about, look at everything you've accomplished. ten
Yeah.
years.
I mean, I think one of the things that humans are kinda bad at is looking back. Not, like, looking back with regret. I think we're pretty
Hmm.
good at things like that, but I think that we forget to, like, look back at how far we've come, like, remembering, that day when I was an intern and I was, like, put in this booth just to, like, become more acquainted with what they actually did on the radio because I was not a big NPR listener when I started as an intern. And now, you know, every now and then, like, I'll be invited to teach high schoolers or something about radio, and they'll be asking these questions, these basic what I would think of as basic fundamental questions. But for them, it's like they don't know. Like they've never tried this before. And it's sometimes it's good to remember like in all your striving to also remember like look how far you got. At one point you were or I was an untrained intern, and now I know so much about radio and interviewing and podcasting and I've gotten to do work with amazing people and done all these things. And that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna keep striving for more. I mean, I think part of life is striving and like go, okay, I did this. I kind of feel like I mastered that. I don't want to be doing that anymore in that capacity because I want to keep learning and growing in a new way. Um, so I think it's I think it's fine that we keep trying to like push and reach new heights. But I think we all would be happier if we remembered like how much we've already learned, that we are not at the bottom rung anymore. We've gotten somewhere. you know? And
Mm,
sometimes that's really hard to remember because you
yeah,
do always want to achieve more, you know?
mm.
There's that drive of wanting to learn and grow always.
What's interesting to that is, I mean, I 100% agree with everything you said. Is if we most people don't look back enough to give themselves credit for what they've accomplished. And then there's this dissatisfaction because when you said, I think someone said something, goes, I can't remember what it is we feel sad, and I can't remember how, probably butchering it, and insecure when we think about the future and what can be accomplished in the future, when in reality we don't have control of the future. We have control of the present, and we can look at what we've
Mhm.
done in the past as a way to like affirm who we are, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So no, that's very interesting. So as we wrap up here, obviously, what's next. What I have a few series of questions that I want to ask here actually before we
Okay.
can dive
Yeah.
into that. So these are called the dumb fun questions. Okay. So the
All
reason
right.
why they call the dumb fun questions, I like to give a history lesson. So it's a little bit of a history. So way back when last year when we started the podcast, we had a very phenomenal guest shows on. And I said, "Hey, we'll have a dumb questions for you." She goes, "Oh, that's not good. There's not no such thing as dumb questions." I said, "No, they're pretty dumb questions." She goes, "No, there's no such thing as dumb questions." I'm like, "All right, how about this? We'll call them the dumb fun questions." And ever since then, it's called the dumb fun questions.
All
So
right. I like it.
the first question we got here is: if you could be any character from a Tom Cruise movie, who would you be and why?
This is one of the questions that you sent me ahead of time that I had to like really, really think about. I mean, you're asking me because one of the things I did was I watched the entire filmography of Tom Cruise from beginning to end, just as an experiment. I thought it would be fun to see how an actor like evolves over their entire career, and and then I wrote a memoir that interwove some of my personal life story with the Tom Cruise filmography. Not yet published, but hopefully one day. We'll see. But anyway, I had such a struggle with this question because I'm assuming if it's me, then I have to like be a female in a Tom Cruise movie. And honestly, like there's not really that many interesting female characters within the Tom Cruise filmography. Uh, so I kind of settled on that maybe I would play Penelope Cruz's role in Vanilla Sky because she's
Okay.
sort of a complex equal to him in the movie.
Uh huh.
Um, but even that, like, I don't know, I feel like I'd much rather watch a Tom Cruise movie than actually I'd like want to just eat breakfast with him before he throws himself off a cliff and then just watch him do it on a screen
So you'd
rather than
be
actually act opposite him. I think.
so you'd be the person, the Tom Cruise breakfast. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
I mean, if he wants to just hang with me, I'm fine with it, you know? I
who's
don't know
who's
that
your who's your favorite actor
who is my favorite act
in
I
all
mean,
of Hollywood?
I definitely came out of watching the filmography of Tom Cruise as a fan of his. I think more than I expected that I would, like so
Okay.
I would say I really like him, like, and I think that he is, when Tom Cruise is done with his career, we will really miss him. He's gonna leave, like, a major hole, I think, in Hollywood because he's sort of the last of a certain type of actor,
That is true.
and, uh, and I think we will miss that when he's gone, as much as people like to make fun of him sometimes now. I think, he will leave a massive emptiness, when he goes, and it will be like the changing of Hollywood to something completely different. Um, so I don't know, I would say he's a favorite, but it's not like I obsess over any particular movie star. I just happen to know a ton about him and his
Tom Cruise.
career.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be for the win. Your
Mhm.
favorite would be Tom Cruise, and because of, I mean, yeah, you're all right. I mean, he does his own stunts. I mean, the dude is just 50 what, 52? I don't know, something
No,
right.
he's like 58
He's
or 6
58.
no, actually, I think he's like 61 now,
No,
actually.
no, 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 no. I don't believe
Yes,
that.
I think if you look it up, he's like 61. You'll have to look it up. But, I mean, I
Uh,
think it's more than he does his own stunts. I mean, he's
He's
gotten
61.
See, I told you. In his later career, he has become basically an action movie person. But if you, like, watch his entire filmography, you kind of realize that he's got incredibly good comedic timing. He can he can deliver lines that are, like, really poorly written in a believable way. where the other actors around him are struggling like to sound like this is something they would actually say.
Yeah.
Every now and then the script's so poorly written that it's hard to deliver. And he can say it in a convincing way where you're like, well, I buy that. What he can't do is disappear. Like we always know that it's Tom Cruise playing a role, right?
Yeah.
But
What do
he's
you
extremely talented. Like he can be very good dramatic. He can do great action stuff. His range is pretty spectacular, which is part of the reason why we picked him as the actor to watch, because I didn't want to end up watching all dramas or all action movies
yeah.
or all comedies. I was looking for the actor who could do all of them, and he was who I came up with.
What do you think about the rumors that he puts stuff in his shoes so he can be taller?
I mean, I understand that, I suppose. I'm only 5'1", and every time I'm in a crowd, I'm just like, "Why is everybody so tall?" Like, this is you
That's
know,
fun.
this is
No, no, no.
ridiculous.
That's 5. I can imagine. So
Yeah.
a few acquaintances, friends of mine. I had a friend who's he's 6'8", and
Mhm.
so I'm 6'3", so I'm not, I'd say I'm okay, tall there. And
Yeah,
he's six foot
you are.
eight. He's yeah, so yeah, so yeah, so but it's weird because for me, 98% of the time, I'm usually the tallest one around.
Mhm.
But then you were like standing right next to a 6'8" dude, and then you're looking at him like, dude, I was like, dude, you're screwing up my mojo. Go away. Like, yeah, I like you like, but it's just weird because it's for me, I don't know, but it's for me, it's just. And I talked to my girlfriend, I was like, is that how it feels like just looking at like tall people? It just feels weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
So
imagine if it was me standing next to your 6'8" friend. It's
yeah,
like, we can
that's.
barely even have a conversation. Like, I am so far down. Like, we definitely have to sit to be able
But even sitting, I think that still puts you at the same height,
I
barely the
mean,
same height.
I'm sitting on a pillow right now, and I'm just sitting at my own desk, It's
Oh,
just
that's why you're so tall. Because I thought I was like, whoa, she's
well,
tall.
she's, like,
Jeez.
barely touching the ceiling
Yeah,
practically, yeah.
yeah. Actually, it's also a comparison too, because yeah, the ceiling. You close up to the ceiling,
Mhm.
everyone's gonna be like, "Oh wow, you must be like 6'11". Jeez.
Not so much.
Which also we never really touched on this, right? Because I know you said
Mm.
you were writing, doing the script writing for the show for a little bit.
Mm.
Um, what do you think about AI in the script writing days? Because Hollywood went on a strike, ChatGPT.
Mm.
What's your take on that?
I mean, I don't actually write. I write a lot for radio, but I mostly write not for the podcast I actually do. If I'm writing for radio, it's usually for something national. I mean, as a writer, I get that it saves people time, but I'm like, I consider myself an artist at heart, and I think that
Mm,
using Chat GPT would defeat the purpose of what it is I'm trying to do. Like,
mm.
I'm trying to express mm, an art in my own way. And so, I don't need anybody to give me a shortcut. I'd rather make myself do the work is how I feel about it.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
yeah, the only time I've ever used it was to try to create a survey for our listeners. And I didn't even do it. My sister did it. And she said, well, here's the survey questions it suggests. And then I just was like, well, I don't know, maybe that one, but, you know, uh, something like that. But I don't know. For me, I'm not like, I hate people who use it. It's more just like, I think as an artist, it defeats the purpose. Do the
Gotcha.
work, figure out what your own voice is.
It's about the art. Okay. So the second question here is: have you ever accidentally called into your own show as a listener, and
I
what
don't know
happened?
how that would be possible. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the one holding the reins. But that said, I will say that if you host a call-in show, the Bittersweet Life is not a call-in show, although people do send in voice memos that we play, sometimes on a topic, but we don't actively take callers. Uh, but my old NPR show did take callers, and I do think that if you are gonna do a call-in show, it's like imperative that you actually call into another show. I think you need to know what it feels like to be
To
the
be
person waiting on the line, waiting,
into
like, for somebody to introduce you live on a station, the nerves of it, like, how much you're like, "Oh my gosh, do I remember what it was I called to say?" Like, "I'm talking to this person I've listened to for years." I think it's important to understand how that feels, and so, yeah, call somebody.
calls.
I have called into radio shows before, but
But okay.
never my own.
Never your own. Okay, so have you ever sent a voice memo in?
Hmm. I don't think so, actually. I never have sent a voice memo in. That's
No.
interesting.
Okay. Well, that would be a good one. Be like, hey, and today we have a voice memo from Katy, and
I'll send you
she's
one if you want.
yeah,
Yeah.
send one in, and we'll incorporate the same thing, and because I actually thought about doing a call-in show, for a little bit. I thought because I think it would be interesting as well, like have a guest on. But the way our podcast works is, everything's pretty much remote, so then they would have to call in, and then you have to hear it, and then it's like it's. But what I was thinking of doing was, I don't know, like a webinar style event.
Mhm.
All right. And
Oh,
then just, yeah, and
yeah.
then invite someone who has, from the show to, and then we kind of have our own like webinar style. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like our own very remote show where everyone is just like, in the background. It's kind of like being alive, but not really like alive. If you,
Oh, yeah, we've done that on the Bittersweet Life where we kinda did, like, a Zoom hangout, but
hmm
we rather than just, like, hanging out, because our show, every episode has its own topic, and so we would bring, like, now we're with a big group of people, but we would still bring a topic to the table. We're gonna be talking about, discovery to I don't know, I'm just whatever we did. Uh, we're gonna be talking about, like, the scariest thing that ever happened to you today, and then if you had and I would just say before we started, like, if you have a story, just let me know and I'll
hmm
toss it to you throughout this whole thing. And then me and Tiffany and my co-host will like kind of anchor it and keep it moving forward. I mean, part of
Interesting.
the challenge of doing a call-in show is you also and it's a little different if you're all looking at each other on a Zoom,
Yeah.
is that you do need to know how to cut somebody off if they're
Yeah.
if they're going off the rails. It's a skill to be like, okay, yeah, really interesting that point. We're gonna move on now. Which can be a really hard thing if you're in a room full of people looking at you who are fans
Huh.
of your show, that it puts you in a different position than if somebody's actually on the phone and you can
Huh.
just put the slider and turn, turn them off.
And turn them off and turn them on. You know what I'm thinking? Even because I'm thinking about the call-in segment. If we have a, in person, we might do an in-person call-in. This is just notes, guys. We'll put it in. So in the next year or so, if you see that, just know it's like, we're rolling it
Mhm.
out. But another thing I was thinking about is just kind of like still on the webinar, because on stream, the platform we're on right now,
Yeah.
we could have it where somebody shows up like, hey, I want to whatever, and then we just boom, invite them on, and then now they pop up on the screen, and then now we can see them all in there, which I think might be a little nerve-wracking for a lot of people to be like, hey, I'm gonna be
Yeah.
on screen now, and hundreds of people are gonna be watching me, and yeah, but like,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I think
It's
that's one for the future evolution.
there is a safety in, like, only it being your voice. It's a little less of a commitment than, if I say, "Oh, yeah, you're gonna be on The Bittersweet Life, but we're only gonna hear you."
Yeah.
People are often more comfortable with that than they are being like, "And we're also gonna look at you."
Yeah.
So dress nicely because 'cause we're putting you up on the screen, I think it's a little bit different, people, especially if they're shy, are often more willing to talk if it's just their voice
I
than
think I agree too. I think it might be. I think it's a little nerve wracking, but I think if you're gonna be signing, if you volunteered and you're signing up for it, so hopefully they have the best Christmas outfit on, so so the whole world doesn't go whoa 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 whoa.
Whoa, remember what was
Uh,
that guy about? Yeah.
I know, like whoa, like hey, you need to shave. Like look at their face. Just kidding. Okay, so the last question is: so if you had to host a podcast episode using only song lyrics,
Ugh.
which artist's lyrics would you choose?
Um, this is a hard one too because 'cause I'm kind of like I like really digging into life, and I'm sort of a moody existentialist occasionally, I think, and, super into, like, the full range of emotional expression. So, I don't know, I think I'd have to go with someone like maybe Leonard Cohen or
Okay,
Bob Dylan, like, people who have that I would actually consider as good of writers as they are, um, singers, musicians, like, what they write also just sorta hits you straight in the heart somehow. Feels
okay.
like they'd
So
have enough in their catalog to work with, you know?
and then you just so what are the two
I
songs
don't
you're
know.
picking from both? What are the two songs
Oh,
you're picking?
I don't know. Like the only one that let's see. There's a song called Happens to the Heart by Leonard Cohen that I really was just listening to in the car actually yesterday in my very old ancient car that cannot stream from my phone.
Oh,
Um
oh, okay. Now I'm curious. Okay, because you had mentioned it previously how there's a tribe and whenever someone else is driving the same car. So if we're looking at an old ancient car, what car is it?
it's it's not that ancient, but in the modern world it is. It's not from the 70s, although I used to have a 1979 Pontiac Bonneville, which was
Oh
such a
yeah.
guzzler I had to get rid of it. I currently drive a 2005 Volkswagen Jetta stick shift
Oh,
with
stick
the
shift.
CD player.
Oh wow, that is some OG. Okay, I used to. The reason why I said is
Mhm.
because I used to drive a 2008 Volkswagen Jetta.
Oh,
Right?
see? You're part of my
Yeah.
tribe.
Well, listen. That car was not. It was not voluntarily that I was driving that car. It was by. But the one thing I would say about it was, I had to run on flats.
Uh-huh.
Right, the run flats, and I lived in not the nicest neighborhood at the time. This was a very long time ago, and
Mhm.
there were a few neighbors. I don't know why they just decided to pick beefs with me for some, which I didn't even know them. I didn't even know them, but every morning somebody would come and poke my tire. So I'd get it,
Oh.
and then so my but I had run on flats, so I could still get to work. So take that. So
That
that's good.
is that
But
is a
yeah,
very sinister person that was
that
doing
was
that.
that. But guess what? They were dedicated. Whoever
They
was dedicated. They
they
knew
should
every time I come,
they should have a podcast. They would show up every week without fail just to make a point.
they'll be like, "Hey, listen, a podcast episode. How to get your neighbor's car? How to make your neighbors late for work or probably not go to work." In this episode, we'll be covering how to puncture the tire. Now, you want to go
Let's do
this?
it.
You want to go this way? If it's a run on flat, you want to do? I don't know, but yeah, I don't. I think you know what's funny in this day and age. I actually think that podcast will go viral more than anything else.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Maybe so, maybe so.
Maybe so. All right. So we're wrapping up here. So what's next for you? Where can people find you? And if someone
Well,
wants to, work with you, maybe do the call-in show that Wink Wink you probably be doing in the future.
yeah, I do some podcast consulting work, so you can hit me up there. I would say, I mean, start with the Bittersweet Life podcast. It's pretty much everywhere you can get a podcast. If you're a kind of person that loves to stream it from the web, it's at thebittersweetlife.net. And I think you could reach me through there, radiokatie at gmail is my email address. Katy, if you want,
Okay.
like, I don't have time to like consult with everybody, but I pick up a few people here and there. Um, and I don't know what else. I would just say,
Okay.
oh, of course, social media, Instagram, Facebook, not on Twitter as much anymore. We are technically there. Just look for the Bittersweet Life podcast. And you'll
Okay.
find us.
All right,
Mhm.
guys. So what we're gonna do is we're going to, if you check in the description of this video as you're watching right now, you would see the links that she has mentioned here, and then also it'll also be the top of the pinned comment as well. So definitely go show some love to Katie. Definitely go check out the podcast, and if you are in Rome and you're like, hey, I'm in Rome, Italia, you could go with the accent. And then rigatoni. Just kidding. But definitely go show some
there
love. And
there are a lot of if you actually are interested in Rome or Italy in general, there are a lot of like tips throughout the podcast about it. Even if you're going there on a trip, Rome
I
is like I always say Rome is like kind of our third co-host,
okay.
popping in, being beautiful and ancient.
What
So
what
yeah.
would you recommend? What would you, because I was thinking, so this I'm going to, I don't like to announce where I'm going to be going to, but I'm going to be going to, so I set a mission this year to go to 13 countries.
Mm,
So Italy is on the list, Greece is on the list, Egypt is on the list. I'm not going to say what city, but pretty much everyone knows you're going to Egypt's on the list, and there's a few other countries that I want to go to. Obviously, going home as well
mhm,
is a
mhm.
possibility as well. But what would you recommend? You know,
I mean, I do think you have to go to Rome in your lifetime. I think
okay,
it's
where exactly? Where would you recommend in Rome?
I mean, if I had to tell you, like, what neighborhood should you be staying in, I would tell you that you should stay in the Trastevere neighborhood which is not, it's across the Tiber River from the historic center of Rome, but
Okay.
it's a kind of an old medievalish neighborhood that's mixed with the modern day. It's not all ancient. It's a mix, but it's very young, very vibrant, and it is a mix of locals and tourists. So it's not all tourists. So you're
Okay.
gonna really feel like you're living in a neighborhood that is like where the Romans are still actually living. It's also like a young, vibrant neighborhood. There's a few universities that are kind of near it. So it also has this like super lively, especially on Friday and Saturday night, street scene. So
Okay.
go there. But I mean, Rome is definitely very walkable. Like, especially if you're just kind of in the historic center, you can plant yourself in Trastevere or somewhere that's like near the Pantheon or something and just wander around. You don't need a vehicle or anything, and you'll see so much more in a day than you ever expected. And if you need tips, you can always come to the Bittersweet Life because we'll tell you like the cool hidden stuff
The
that
cool
you,
hidden stuff.
yep, that you might miss otherwise that you should definitely check out.
Okay. All right. I personally check out the Bittersweet Life as well, guys. I highly recommend you guys do. And if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. And if you are on Spotify, hit one of the buttons on there, give us a 5-star on Spotify. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, I don't know who listens to Apple Podcasts, but definitely go ahead and like the show. And thanks again for everyone being on here. And thanks again for you guys spending your time with us. And take care, everyone. Bye bye.